Welcome to a new deep dive on Snapbook, the show where we break down the books you care about so you don't have to read them cover to cover.
Right, save me some time.
Exactly. So today's book is The Art of Focuses by Dan Koh, which was actually suggested by one of you.
It's a great pick, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. It dives into using your attention as like a tool to escape a distracted world and build an autonomous, meaningful life. So what's this book really about and why does it matter? But, before we even get into the weeds, I want you to think about something.
Oh, here we go.
No, really, think about the last time you spent an hour doom scrolling on your phone when you actually meant to be going to sleep.
We've all been there.
Right.
Yeah.
You probably looked at the clock, felt that immediate wash of exhaustion, guilt, and just this weird low-level anxiety.
Mhm.
But Dan Koh makes a rather terrifying argument here. He says that wasn't an accident.
Not at all.
Like your brain didn't fail you. It worked exactly as the modern world designed it to.
Yeah, and that's a heavy realization. At its core, this book is about leveraging focus to combat mental chaos, reinvent your identity, and construct a self-reliant future, often through creating a one-person business.
Which sounds intense, but it matters.
It matters massively because modern society is, quite literally, evolutionary conditioned to steal your attention.
Yeah.
It leaves you trapped in this comfortable but deeply unfulfilling loop of mediocrity.
A comfortable trap. I like that phrasing.
Yeah. But what's actually new or different here? Let's break it down. And to truly understand what Koh is getting at, we kind of have to start with the physics of the human mind.
Physics of the mind. Okay.
Yeah, he introduces this concept called the supreme law of psychic entropy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because entropy, we learned about this in high school physics, right?
The second law of thermodynamics.
Exactly. Basically stating that any closed system naturally declines into disorder and chaos unless you actively pump energy into it. Like a hot cup of coffee gets cold.
Yeah.
A mountain slowly erodes. But applying a law of thermodynamics directly to human psychology feels like a massive leap.
It is a leap, for sure, but it's a necessary one to understand why that doom-scrolling scenario you mentioned feels so awful. The math behind human perception is just staggering.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think about this. Your conscious mind, the part of you that is actively listening to this conversation right now, the part making deliberate choices, can only process about 10 to 50 bits of information per second.
Wait, 10 to 50 bits? That sounds incredibly tiny.
It's minuscule, especially when you compare it to your unconscious mind.
Which is processing what?
Roughly 11 million bits of information per second.
Oh, wow. Wait, really? 11 million?
Yeah, 11 million simultaneously. It's regulating your body temperature, it's feeling the texture of your chair, scanning the room for peripheral movement.
Filtering out the hum of the refrigerator, all that stuff.
Exactly. Your brain is a supercomputer, but your conscious attention is just a tiny, tiny flashlight beam in a massive dark warehouse.
So if I'm not actively pointing that flashlight at something specific, the darkness just takes over.
That's the entropy part. Without a clear, intentional goal to focus your mind on, your brain doesn't just power down into a peaceful screensaver mode.
It doesn't just chill out.
No, it defaults to scanning those 11 million bits for threats. That's evolutionary biology. It looks for problems.
Because it kept us alive on the savannah.
Right. So now, instead of a tiger, it fixates on a weird ache in your side, or a vaguely passive-aggressive email your boss sent yesterday, or just the geopolitical state of the world.
Which is terrifying.
That is psychic entropy. Without applied energy, without directed focus, your mental state actively decays into stress, anxiety, and random negative thoughts.
Okay, wait, stop right there. I have to push back on this Joe Rogan style.
Go for it.
Because I have a really hard time accepting that just doing nothing is inherently destructive. This sounds exhausting. Are we supposed to be hyper-focused productivity machines 24/7? Because chilling out on the couch on a Sunday afternoon after a brutal week doesn't feel like my mind is decaying into absolute chaos. It feels like I'm recovering.
And that is the exact trap most people fall into when they hear this. Koh makes a crucial distinction here. There is a vast difference between unconscious distraction and conscious open focus.
Okay, what's the difference?
When you are lying on the couch, mindlessly swiping through a social feed or going down a WebMD rabbit hole because your heart fluttered, that is unconscious distraction. You have surrendered the flashlight.
You're letting the algorithm hold it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You aren't resting. You are letting algorithms and baseline survival instincts jerk your attention around. That actively drains your energy.
Because my brain is still processing all the micro stresses of the content, even if my physical body is perfectly still.
Precisely. But conscious open focus is totally different. Imagine taking a walk in a park without your phone. You aren't trying to solve a complex math problem, but you are intentionally present. You are feeling the air, listening to the birds, letting your thoughts wander without attaching to them.
You're still holding the flashlight.
You are. You've just widened the beam. That is deep rest. The danger Co is pointing out isn't rest itself, it's the default path of modern society that masquerades as rest.
Ah, the default path. You mean the conveyor belt we all get put on?
The script.
You go to school, you memorize the answers, you get a corporate job, you commute an hour each way, you come home mentally fried, you watch 3 hours of streaming television to numb out, and you repeat that until you're 65.
And why that default path is so dangerous is because it exploits our brain's love for habit and energy conservation. The modern world is perfectly engineered to spoon-feed you just enough comfort to keep you compliant.
But not enough meaning to make you fulfilled.
Exactly. You get the steady paycheck, the fluorescently lit cubicle, the customized entertainment feed. It feels safe. But it is a comfort that slowly drains your life force because it requires zero intentional focus.
So think of your mental state like a house you just bought. If you move in and decide, I'm just going to relax and do absolutely nothing to this place, you don't maintain it, you don't clean the gutters, you don't fix the tiny leak under the sink.
It's going to fall apart.
Right. The house doesn't just stay neutral. It doesn't remain in the exact condition you bought it. Dust accumulates. The leak rots the floorboards. Mold grows. Eventually, the roof caves in.
That's psychic entropy in a nutshell.
You literally have to apply continuous, deliberate energy just to keep the house standing, let alone renovate it. If you don't actively direct your mind, the environment rots it for you.
That captures the essence perfectly. You are either applying energy to build your own reality, or the world is applying energy to tear yours down.
Wow.
But this introduces a massive psychological hurdle, because if you realize your current life, that default path is a decaying house, you have to move out. You have to build something new.
Which is terrifying, because if you ask the average person sitting in traffic on a Tuesday morning, what is your ultimate vision for your life? We usually freeze.
Total deer in headlights.
They have no idea.
And that is entirely normal. Imagining a perfect future requires projecting into the unknown. It requires synthesizing experiences you haven't even had yet. It's cognitively heavy.
So what do you do if you can't visualize the dream house?
Co offers a brilliantly contrarian starting point. Don't start with what you want. Start with what you completely, utterly despise.
Okay, the anti-vision. Insight number 2.
Yes, the anti-vision. It is infinitely easier to articulate what you don't want because you have the scars to prove it.
That makes sense.
You know exactly what a toxic boss feels like. You know the exact knot in your stomach when you have to check your bank account before buying groceries. You know the creeping dread of Sunday evening.
The Sunday scaries are real. Okay, but how does focusing on all that misery actually help? I get that it's easier to define, but dwelling on how much I hate my micromanager boss or my hour-long commute sounds like a fantastic way to just become a deeply bitter, cynical person.
It's a risk if you do it wrong.
Like, if I spend my morning meditating on everything that is wrong with my life, I'm not going to want to build a new house. I'm going to want to pull the covers over my head. How does this not just paralyze you with anxiety?
Because of how human motivation is wired,
Yeah.
we have approach motivation running toward a reward and avoidance motivation running away from a threat.
Okay.
Evolutionary psychology shows us that avoidance motivation is incredibly powerful in the short term. If a bear is chasing you, you don't need a 5-year vision board of a peaceful cabin to run fast.
You just need to not get eaten.
Exactly. The anti-vision isn't a place you live mentally. It is a synthetic bear you create to scare yourself into motion. You map out exactly what your life will look like in 5 years if you change absolutely nothing.
Make it visceral.
You have to. You visualize the exact cubicle, the exact arguments about money, the exact physical decline. You engineer a feeling of disgust.
Oh, man. So it's like the heat from a burning building. You aren't sitting in the fire letting it consume you. You are harnessing that intense thermal energy to power the engine of your getaway car.
I love that car analogy. Yeah.
You use the repulsion to hit the gas.
Exactly. Disgust and frustration are highly mobilizing emotions if directed outward instead of inward. But Co argues that sometimes even visualizing the burning building isn't enough.
Why not?
Because the modern default path is just so incredibly comfortable. It's not a raging fire. It's a slowly boiling pot of water.
So you don't jump out because it's just warm enough to put you to sleep.
Precisely. Which is where a very intense concept called tactical stress comes in.
Tactical stress. Sounds military.
It kind of is. If the fear of staying the same isn't naturally greater than the fear of change, you have to artificially tip the scales. You have to intentionally induce a do-or-die situation to shock your system.
Give me a real-world example of that.
Yeah.
Because inducing a do-or-die situation sounds like reckless financial or career advice.
It can be if done blindly, but tactical stress is calculated. It's not just blowing up your life for no reason.
Okay, so what does it look like?
Let's take a freelance graphic designer who realizes she's trapped dealing with low-paying, abusive clients, but she's too exhausted to look for better ones. Tactical stress is firing her two worst clients on a Friday, knowing full well she now cannot make rent next month unless she aggressively upgrades her portfolio and pitches high-tier clients by Monday morning.
Oh my God, that would cause a literal panic attack.
And that panic is the energy. She just created a vacuum. She put herself in position where the only thing stopping her from surviving is her own execution.
She burned the boats.
She ripped away the safety net of mediocrity. You shatter your own limiting beliefs because suddenly you don't have the luxury of entertaining them. You just have to perform.
Okay, so the anti-vision gets the getaway car moving, and tactical stress slams the foot on the gas pedal. We have achieved escape velocity from the default path.
We're moving.
But once you are speeding away from your old life, you need to know where you are driving. If you're just running from something with no destination, you're going to crash into a different wall.
Which is why you need a framework to map the unknown. And this brings us to insight number 3. Coe suggests looking at life through the lens of a video game. You need a purpose, a path, and a priority.
Look, I got to pause you here. The whole gamify your life thing is everywhere right now. Everyone says treat your chores like a quest.
It's a very popular buzzword.
It is, but let's be real. If you're slogging through a spreadsheet at 4:00 p.m. on a Thursday, or you're dragging your feet through a tedious, repetitive argument with your partner about who is supposed to unload the dishwasher, trying to pretend you're a wizard leveling up just sounds absurd. It sounds like toxic positivity.
It does sound absurd if you misunderstand what a game actually is.
Okay, set me straight.
The foreword of the book is actually written by Joey Justice, a former video game addict turned performance consultant, and he clarifies this beautifully. People fail at gamifying their lives because they think life is a game to be won.
Like getting the high score.
They think it's about getting the high score or beating the final boss. If you treat an argument with your partner as a game to win, you will destroy your relationship.
Right, because someone has to lose.
Exactly. But great video games aren't just about winning. They are about exploration. They are about understanding the mechanics of a new world.
So how does that translate to purpose, path, and priority?
Your purpose doesn't need to be some grand lightning bolt passion to save the rainforest. Your purpose is simply the most pressing problem in front of you right now.
Whatever is in your immediate field of vision.
Yes. Your path is the strategy to solve it, and your priority is the lead domino, the absolute next action you must take.
So how does that apply to the mind-numbing spreadsheet at 4:00 p.m.?
By changing the rules of engagement to match your skill level. Psychologists call this the flow state. If a task is too easy, you get bored. If it's too hard, you get anxious. Flow happens right on the razor's edge between your current skill and the challenge at hand.
Okay, I've heard of flow. So if the spreadsheet is boring, it's because the challenge is too low.
Exactly. So you artificially raise it, you create a microgame, you give yourself exactly 14 minutes to finish a task that normally takes 30, using only keyboard shortcuts, no mouse allowed.
Oh, you can strain the parameters to force engagement?
Yes, you take control of the frame. If you are dragged antique shopping by your spouse and you hate it, you are suffering from psychic entropy. Your mind is decaying into resentment because you have no goal.
So you invent one.
You create a game. Find the weirdest, most historically inaccurate item in the store without them noticing what you're doing. Instantly, your brain is engaged. You are hunting. You are observing. The environment hasn't changed, but your perception of it has.
That's brilliant. This reminds me of being dropped into one of those massive open-world RPGs, a role-playing game where you first open the map and 95% of it is just grayed out.
Yeah.
The fog of war.
Yes, perfect analogy.
If you only follow the shiny, blinking arrows of the tutorial missions, which is society's default path of go to school, get a job, buy a mortgage, you retire, you stay in the starting village your whole life. You never see the whole map.
You never see what the game really has to offer.
Right. You have to willingly walk into the dark, unknown areas of the map. Take on the weird side quests to actually figure out what you're capable of.
And stepping into that fog of war introduces what Coe calls the perception threshold.
What's that?
The beginning of any new path is exciting, the honeymoon phase. The end is rewarding. But the middle is an absolute grind. It's where your skills aren't quite good enough to realize your vision, and everything feels clunky.
The trough of sorrow.
Exactly. Most people hit that threshold and quit. They retreat back to the tutorial village. But pushing through that threshold is the only way to expand your level of mind. You are literally upgrading your character's operating system.
But upgrading your character takes a massive amount of resources. And in this game of life, your primary resource isn't a health bar or gold coins. It's your time, and more specifically, your mental bandwidth.
Which brings us to a very controversial idea.
Insight number 4. The paradox of the 4-hour workday. Coe argues that 4 hours of intense, conscious focus is vastly superior to 8 hours of shallow, distracted work. In fact, he claims human cognitive energy for deep work naturally caps out at about 3 to 5 hours a day.
To understand why this is so critical, we have to look at how the 8-hour workday even came into existence, because it is a completely fabricated concept.
It wasn't handed down on stone tablets.
Nope. In the early 1900s, during the Industrial Age, Henry Ford popularized the 8-hour, 5-day work week. But think about the context. He was managing factory workers on an assembly line.
Pure physical labor.
Exactly. The work was purely physical and repetitive. The value was tied directly to time spent pulling a lever. If the machine ran for 8 hours, it produced twice as many cars as it did in 4 hours. Time equaled output.
But we aren't pulling levers anymore. At least, the people trying to build autonomous lives aren't.
We have transitioned into the imagination age. The economy now values consciousness, creativity, complex problem solving, and synthesis. And cognitive labor does not scale linearly like physical labor.
Meaning, I can't just force myself to be creative for 8 hours straight.
You cannot just command your brain to generate brilliant, novel ideas for 8 uninterrupted hours. Modern neuroscience shows that cognitive load has a strict ceiling. If you push past those roughly 4 hours of deep work, you aren't just getting diminishing returns, you actually start making negative progress.
You start breaking things.
You introduce errors, you get irritable, your decision-making degrades, and you end up creating messes that you have to spend the next day cleaning up.
Okay, I hear this a lot from the productivity bros on the internet, and I have to push back hard on this.
Let's hear it.
This sounds like an absolute fantasy for a very privileged subset of wealthy online entrepreneurs. Like, if someone is grinding at a standard corporate job, say they're a logistics manager at a shipping company, they can't just stand up at 1:00 p.m., tell their boss, hey, my intense cognitive focus is capped out for the day. I'm heading home to let my subconscious process things.
Yeah, that's not going to fly.
They will be fired immediately. How is this practical for 99% of the population?
It's a completely fair critique, and the distinction here is between your current reality and your target lifestyle design. Coe isn't telling the logistics manager to walk out at noon tomorrow.
Okay, good.
The 4-hour workday is the architectural blueprint of the house you are trying to build. If you are stuck in a 9 to 5, it means you have to fiercely, ruthlessly protect 30 to 60 minutes of uninterrupted, high-intensity focus early in the morning for your own vision before you hand your best cognitive energy over to your employer.
So you pay yourself first, from an attention standpoint.
Exactly. You start with 1 hour. But the reason 4 hours is the ultimate goal isn't just because working less is nice. It's because of what happens when you stop working. The book dives into the default mode network, or the DMN.
The DMN, what is that?
This is a network of interacting brain regions that becomes highly active when you are not focused on the outside world. When you step away from the keyboard and go for a walk, do the dishes, or take a shower, your brain doesn't shut off. It shifts into the DMN.
And what is the DMN actually doing while I'm washing dishes?
It's quietly running complex algorithms in the background. It is organizing the massive chunks of information you ingested during your deep work phase, connecting disparate ideas, and solving the problems your conscious mind got stuck on.
Which explains so much. This is why you never get your best ideas while staring blankly at a blinking cursor.
Never.
You get the million-dollar idea in the shower or while driving, because the DMN finally had the bandwidth to hand the solution up to your conscious mind.
Charles Darwin is a perfect historical example of this. You look at his schedule, and the guy was supposedly revolutionizing biology, but he barely seemed to be working.
Really?
He would work in his study with absolute laser focus for about 90 minutes. Then he'd stop and go for a long walk. Then he'd read some letters, do another 90-minute bout of work, and take a nap. He built an entire scientific revolution on a framework of extreme focus paired with extreme intentional rest.
Wow. Okay, think of your brain like a sponge. When you sit down for a deep work session, you are squeezing that sponge completely dry. You are getting every single drop of productive, creative juice out of it.
Great visual.
The rest of the day, the walking, the napping, the playing with your kids, is you putting that dry sponge back into a bucket of water so it can soak up new experiences, new ideas, and new energy.
Right.
The corporate 8-hour grind is a system that demands you keep squeezing a dry sponge for 4 extra hours. You don't get any more water, you just end up tearing the sponge to pieces.
Which leads us perfectly into the next major problem. If you are going to eventually escape that 8-hour sponge tearing system and transition into a life where you only work 4 highly intense hours, those 4 hours have to be incredibly valuable.
You can't just be doing data entry.
No, you cannot be performing a repetitive task that a piece of software can do.
Right, because if your job is just moving data from column A to column B, AI is going to do that for free in about 2 years. You have to become irreplaceable. Which introduces insight number 5, Coe's concept of the skill stack and becoming a specialized generalist.
The industrial age demanded ultra-specialization. Be the one guy who knows how to fix the specific gear on the specific machine. But in the modern creator economy, over-specialization makes you fragile.
Why fragile?
Because if you only know how to run Facebook ads and the algorithm changes overnight, your entire livelihood is wiped out. Coe argues you must stack skills across different domains to build an economic moat around yourself.
He breaks this down into a very specific formula. You need to target one of the 4 eternal markets: health, wealth, relationships, or happiness.
Because human beings will always pay to solve problems in those areas.
Right. Then you combine that market with evergreen skills writing, speaking, marketing, and sales. Those never go out of style. Finally, you layer on modern, results-oriented skills like coding, video editing, or graphic design.
And the magic happens through intersectionality. Let's look at a hyper-specific modern example. Let's say you want to write a blog about fitness. There are 10 million generic fitness blogs out there. ChatGPT can write a perfectly functional, grammatically correct article about how to do a deadlift in 3 seconds. If you are just a writer in the health market, you are obsolete.
So how do you beat the AI?
By stacking your weird lived experiences on top of those baseline skills. You aren't just writing about fitness, you are combining the eternal market of health, the evergreen skill of persuasive writing, the technical skill of video editing, and your personal lived experience of overcoming a devastating lower back injury while maintaining a demanding corporate travel schedule.
Okay, that's incredibly specific.
And then you inject your specific philosophical worldview. Maybe you are deeply into stoicism. Suddenly, you are a generic fitness writer. You are the stoic corporate traveler who rehabbed a broken back through micro workouts.
You have created a niche of one.
Yes, ChatGPT cannot replicate the authentic human struggle, the nuance of the emotional pain, or the specific synthesis of those overlapping interests.
I see the power in that, but I have a major concern here.
What's that?
Isn't trying to master all these massive domains, learning to write persuasively, learning to shoot and edit video, mastering sales psychology, plus understanding your specific market. Isn't that exactly what leads to the information overload and the psychic entropy we were just talking about? How do you learn a 5-part skill stack without completely burning out?
It's a very common roadblock, and it happens because people try to learn these skills in a vacuum, like they are back in high school studying for a test.
Memorizing textbooks.
Exactly. Coe solves this using 2 principles: the law of use and the protege effect. You must abandon the idea of learning just to learn. You only consume information through the extremely narrow lens of the exact problem you are trying to solve today.
Give me an example of the law of use in action.
Let's say your next lead domino, your priority, is to build a landing page to collect emails for a newsletter. You do not go buy a 40-hour masterclass on web development.
Or read a textbook on color theory.
Right. You go to YouTube, type in how to build a landing page on Card in 10 minutes, and you only learn the exact buttons you need to click to get the page live. You ignore the other 99% of the software. You learn the skill by immediately using it.
It's like trying to learn Spanish. If you sit at a desk and try to memorize the entire Spanish-English dictionary from A to Z, your brain will reject it. You will burn out in a weekend.
Completely.
But if you drop yourself in the middle of Madrid and you just learn the exact phrase you need to order a coffee and then the phrase you need to find the bathroom, you build your vocabulary outward based on immediate survival and utility. You stack the words organically.
Exactly. And then you accelerate that learning through the protege effect.
What's that?
It's the psychological phenomenon where teaching a concept forces you to understand it faster and deeper than just studying it. When you try to explain how you built that landing page to someone else, your brain is forced to organize the information, identify the gaps in its own logic, and solidify the neural pathways.
So you teach while you learn.
You don't wait until you are an absolute master to start sharing what you know. You learn, you build, and you teach the person who is exactly one step behind you.
And as you keep doing this, your skills look like a giant Venn diagram. At first, your writing, your video editing, and your fitness knowledge are all separate circles. But as you tackle bigger projects, those circles expand and start to overlap. And the center of that diagram where everything crosses over, that is your niche of one.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of the book. Once you have built this unique avatar, once you have escaped the default path, harnessed your focus, and built a niche of one, what is the vessel you use to actually deploy this into the real world to survive?
And that leads us to insight number 6, turning yourself into a business. Coe argues that the ultimate expression of mastery, autonomy, and self-reliance in the 21st century is the one-person business.
Yes.
You pursue your own genuine curiosities in public, you solve your own personal problems, and then you package those solutions as digital products, services, or media for other people.
Think about the profound paradigm shift this represents. For the last century, survival meant renting your physical time or your cognitive bandwidth to a massive corporation.
You clocked in and clocked out.
You suppressed your true interests from 9 to 5 just to pay the bills, and then tried to squeeze your self-actualization into your weekends. But the one-person business model collapses those two things into a single pursuit.
You literally get paid to become a better, more capable version of yourself. Your financial survival becomes directly tied to your personal growth.
It's a beautiful alignment.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because this is where a lot of people check out.
I'm ready.
Does the world really need 8 billion one-person businesses? Every time I log onto social media, it feels like everyone is a coach selling a how-to course to other coaches on how to sell courses.
It can definitely feel like a feedback loop.
It feels like a giant digital pyramid scheme of vaporware. If everyone is sitting at home selling PDFs on how to be productive, who is fixing the plumbing, who is farming the food, who is building the bridges?
It is the most common and vital critique of the creator economy. But we have to look at macroeconomic trends. Yes, we will always need plumbers, farmers, and engineers. But robotics, AI, and automation are eating the bottom floor of every single industry at terrifying speed.
So the landscape is shifting.
Drastically. The friction of producing generic goods and services is dropping to near zero. So you have to ask, what retains value in a world of infinite AI-generated abundance?
Authentic human connection.
Exactly. Human curation, shared struggle, and trusted perspective. Coe argues that business, stripped of its corporate jargon, is a deeply spiritual endeavor.
Spiritual, how so?
It is the act of transferring your quality of experience to another human being to ease their suffering or elevate their joy. When you package your solution into a one-person business, you aren't just selling a generic how-to guide. You are documenting your story graph, the peaks and valleys of your actual life.
Because the person buying it isn't paying for the information. I mean, they could get the raw information from an AI. They are paying for the context.
Yes. If you just spent 2 years figuring out how to balance raising a toddler with writing a novel, the person buying your guide doesn't just want time-blocking templates.
Right. They want to know how you handled the guilt.
They want to know how you manage the sleep deprivation. They are buying resonance. They are buying the relief of knowing someone exactly like them survived the specific fire they are currently standing in.
Wow.
That is an economic model that AI cannot displace because AI has no skin in the game. It cannot suffer, therefore its solutions lack the context of human friction.
So the goal isn't to build a billion-dollar tech startup and hire 500 employees. The goal is radical self-reliance. It's creating a sustainable, autonomous ecosystem where your attention is yours to direct, your focus builds your own house, and your lived experience becomes the very thing that sustains you.
It is the rejection of the default path in its purest form.
That is incredibly powerful. All right, here's the one thing we challenge you to try this week. Write down your anti-vision. Take 10 minutes to detail exactly what you don't want your life to look like in 5 years, and identify the one lead domino you can push over today to avoid it. Snap this into your routine and see what happens.
Before we go, consider this staggering number, 125 billion. That is roughly the total number of bits of conscious information your brain will be able to process over an 80-year lifespan.
125 billion.
It sounds like a massive number, but it is entirely finite. It is the absolute limit of your life's currency. If you aren't deliberately choosing how to spend those bits, the default world is perfectly, ruthlessly engineered to spend them for you. So ask yourself, how many of your precious bits did you spend today on someone else's manufactured outrage? And how many did you spend constructing your own vision?
Thanks for listening to Snapbook. Got a book you want us to break down next? Drop it at snapbook.fm or tag us on social as SnapbookPod. And if you liked this deep dive, share it with someone who's thinking about reading The Art of Focuses, but never got around to it. Until next time, snap in, level up,